Hey, everybody, before we get started today, make sure you visit my website, beforethelightspod.com. Go to the bottom of the page and click on the vegas.com banners. To get the best deals in Las Vegas for shows, hotels, and vacation packages, go to beforethelightspod.com and click on the vegas.com banners. Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale, and welcome to Before the Lights Podcast, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Today, we are joined by Geoff Schumacher, the Vice President of Exhibits and Program of the Mob Museum. We're going to talk about not only the museum, the new casino anniversary exhibit, but much more. Geoff has a 25-year journalism career that includes the Las Vegas Sun, editor of Las Vegas City Life. He founded Las Vegas Mercury, which was an alternative newspaper. He was the director of community publications for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He's an author of Sun, Sin, and Suburbia, a history of modern Las Vegas, and also Howard Hughes, Power, Paranoia, and Palace Intrigue. He was an editor of Nevada for 150 years in the Silver State. Please welcome to the show, Geoff Schumacher. Geoff, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
The museum is a must-see attraction, in my opinion, especially as being a platinum member, for not only Las Vegas locals, but anyone visiting Las Vegas. It shows the mob's impact not only on Las Vegas, but all over the entire world. And for me, it really starts when you're walking up the steps to the museum and hearing the music from that time period being played. And before I go into the history of the building, was the music something that was always going to be part of this exhibit, of this attraction?
You know, I think I think we wanted people to start getting in the mood of the classic Las Vegas, of the mob and the whole mob era, even before they start experiencing the exhibits. So we wanted it to be an immersive experience, whether you're standing on the steps or whether you're in the midst of it on the third or second or first floor.
And if you would, Geoff, would you talk to my listeners about what the history of the Mob Museum building is and all the things it's been in the past?
Absolutely. In many ways, the museum's building is our greatest artifact. It's first of all, in Las Vegas, there aren't a lot of old buildings, and our building dates back to 1933. It's a product of the era when Las Vegas saw a lot of growth resulting from the construction of Hoover Dam. And Hoover Dam construction started in 1931. The construction of our building started in 1931. And the federal government recognized and the local community recognized that the city was going to need a proper federal facility, to house the different agencies, as well as to have a courtroom and have a post office. And so the building, was one of the most prominent buildings in town for many, many years. It also was the site in 1950 of a historic event, which was a meeting of the Kefauver Committee. And Estes Kefauver was a senator from Tennessee who chaired a committee that was investigating organized crime all over the United States. They held hearings in 14 different cities. The smallest city where they held a hearing was Las Vegas. And that was on November 15th, 1950, and they held it in our courtroom on the second floor of the museum. And they interviewed, and quizzed a number of people involved in the local casino industry, which was just really starting to blossom at that point. And they quizzed them about their mob ties and everything else. And it contributed to the Kefauver Committee's understanding of the mob, which is what they were going for. And so this historic event in our building ties real nicely with the current use of the building. The federal government didn't need this building anymore after around 2000. The city had grown so much that they had built other buildings and other courthouses. And so the city of Las Vegas was fortunate enough to be able to take over the building for $1 a year and for a very long period. And what they did was they said there were two conditions on taking it over. One, they needed to restore the building to its historic, maintain its historic integrity. It's on the national, landmarks list. And the other thing we had to do was use it for some kind of cultural endeavor. It couldn't be turned into, apartments or some kind of commercial enterprise. It needed to be something cultural. So that could be they could have done art gallery, or they could have done live performance, that kind of thing. But the museum was the logical way to go. And then Mayor Oscar Goodman, and he was the mayor of Las Vegas for 3 terms. Early on in his first term, the building came into the city's hands, and it was his idea to do a museum dedicated to the history of organized crime in America. And so here we are today with this historic building with historic ties to this mob investigation, and we're telling that story every day.
It opened on February 14th in 2012. Was that date picked to go in correlation with St. Valentine's Day Massacre, or was it just a coincidence?
Oh no, that was very intentional.
Okay.
Besides the building, the first major artifact that was acquired for the Mob Museum was the bricks from the wall of the building where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred in Chicago in 1929. And that was a big investment, but we were able to secure the bricks that that an entrepreneur named George Patey had acquired when the building was torn down back in 1967. And we got them from his niece, who happens to live in Las Vegas, and we resurrected that wall. We knew that moment in mob history was incredibly important and incredibly well known. It's been depicted in movies and so forth. So we thought, okay, let's feature the St. Valentine's Day Massacre wall, and why not have our anniversary on a historic day in the history of the mob? So that was very intentional.
When you go to the Mob Museum, there is exhibits on the first floor. It really starts on the 3rd floor. You take the elevator up, and the elevator doors open, and the first thing you come to is getting your picture taken in a lineup display of what it almost would be like if you were being booked and you can't see anything in front of you. Geoff, if you would talk about the idea of putting that as soon as you come in to start your experience.
Yeah, I think the original vision was that to sort of kick off your mob museum experience with a bang, something interactive, something to get you, just like you mentioned, the music, something to get you in the mood, get you into the feel of things. And so the concept of standing in a lineup like they used to do in police precincts, where the real bad guy was in the lineup and there were 3 or 4 other guys lined up around him, and the witness needed to pick out the bad guy or try to. That was a pretty common technique, 100 years ago, even 50 years ago in police work. And so we decided that, well, let's start with that. Let's allow people to get their picture taken in a lineup with a one-way mirror, and hold up a little sign with your number on it, your serial number for your case or whatever, and people just love it. They love that experience of being actively involved with the museum right off the bat. So that's kind of how that started, and then from there you kick into the history of the mob in America.
We don't need to go through all of them, but if you would kind of pick out 1 or 2 of the top exhibits that you hear from guests that come through the doors that they enjoy the most.
Well, I think for sure, people love the Prohibition area. Prohibition was a critical period in mob history. It was a period of tremendous growth for the mob, as they provided the liquor that people wanted when it was illegal to have, and that Prohibition area also includes, of course, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre wall, which is very popular, as well as a more recent acquisition on our part, which is the evidence from the crime scene of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And so we have bullets that were removed from the bodies of the victims. We have other shells and other bullets that were recovered from the crime scene, and other information assembled by the coroner, Cook County coroner, at the time of the massacre in 1929. Very rare to have that kind of evidence in a museum. And so people really enjoyed that. I think, flashing forward a little bit, on the first floor, people derive tremendous memories and ideas and thoughts from participating in the use of force firearms training simulator. And what we do there is, the museum is about the history of organized crime and law enforcement. And we deal with history, but we also deal with contemporary issues. And one of those issues that's just such a hot button in the country today is police use of force or excessive force. And so we have a firearms training simulator that is more advanced than most that you would see. You go through 2 different digital experiences where you are equipped with a laser-sighted firearm, and you have to make decisions on this video as to whether you're going to shoot or not shoot somebody based on, you're the training officer, you're the officer, in training, and you need to make some good decisions. But the kicker is the third room that we have in this training simulator is a live action room. So we have an actor, an employee of the museum, who is serving as an actor, and you have to interact personally with that individual and as an officer. And so you're telling him to stop doing what he's doing, or you're trying to de-escalate the situation, which can often work or not. And so people walk out of this experience, all they want to do is talk about what they did or didn't do, what they did right, what they did wrong. Typically, people are very humbled by the experience. They're like, man, that's a lot more complicated than I thought it was. And that's exactly what we want them to leave it with, because you know how it is. You'll watch 5 or 10 seconds of video on television of a police shooting, and you immediately form a decision. I think the police officer did the right thing, or I think the officer did the wrong thing. Typically, there is a lot more information that you really need to have to fully understand each situation. And that's what we're hoping to provide with this exhibit and this interactive experience.
It's on my list to do. I haven't done it yet. I've done the speakeasy. I've done the crime lab experience. The firearms is definitely on my list to do as well. Geoff, 25 years since Martin Scorsese's Casino hit the theaters in 1995. Movie starred Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Sharon Stone. It's been argued as one of the best mob movies ever made, based on true events in Las Vegas in the 70s and 80s. The entire movie was shot in Vegas and based off the book of Casino by Nicholas Pileggi. The Mob Museum has opened a temporary exhibit that I understand will go till November of 2021 that has displayed some memorabilia and rare photographs and stuff. If you would, talk about, where is the exhibit in the museum and what is it offering?
Sure. So, Casino is such an important part, the movie Casino is such an important part of our museum. I really think, I'm not sure there would be a mob museum if there hadn't been that movie, right? Because what it did is it crystallized in people's minds that the Las Vegas part of the mob story was important. It was a big deal, and that it was tied in with all these other cities, Chicago and Cleveland and Kansas City and Milwaukee. And anyway, so we wanted to commemorate the 25th anniversary of this movie, and we did so with an event which we recently held, in which Nick Pileggi participated. That was wonderful. And then now we have this temporary exhibit. And the exhibit includes a number of interesting objects. First of all, in the movie, the casino from which Robert De Niro is skimming money is called the Tangiers right. Casino. It's not a real casino in Las Vegas, but it was based on the Stardust Hotel, which is no longer with us in Las Vegas, but that was the place that was the major casino from which the Chicago mob was skimming back in the day. And what they did, though, very cleverly, the movie producers said, you know what, we need the Tangiers to feel very real. So just like any casino would do, they created all this branded merchandise, right, with the Tangiers logo. First of all, they created the Tangiers logo, and then they created the merchandise to go around it. So matchbooks, ashtrays, playing cards, all of these different items that a typical casino would have, especially back in those days. And so they had to make those for the Tangiers as well. So we have on display a large number of those different items that were produced for the movie, and up to and including one of the glass plates that was in the insert that goes in the slot machine at the front of the slot machine to tell you this is the casino you're in. Now it might say Wheel of Fortune or something like that, but back in the day you would promote your own casino. So we have all of those on display. We also have a number of interesting items. For example, if you remember the movie, there are moments in the movie where they show either somebody reading a newspaper or they'll show the newspaper on the screen depicting how the press is covering what's going on in the movie. So, for example, Robert De Niro's character is denied a license, or there's all this mob mayhem going on in Las Vegas, and so you see the headlines. Well, they had to create actual newspapers that had this material in them, and lots of movies have these. Well, these were produced at the Las Vegas Sun back when they had a printing press, and the Las Vegas Sun, I happened to be a friend of mine, Brian Allison, was involved in creating them, and so he still had extra copies of these newspapers that were printed, with Robert De Niro's image on the front and the headlines and so forth. And so he donated those to the museum a few years ago. We were able to put those on display. So we have those kinds of things. We also have some photographs from the set that you wouldn't see normally. They're not available online or whatever. These are, unique pictures that Oscar Goodman had. Oscar Goodman played himself in the movie. Mm-hmm. And so he's very involved with our museum. So he donated some pictures to us, and always some other pictures as well that we have that are unique to this exhibit. So we feel like we've done justice to the movie and its importance in the story of the mob and of Las Vegas.
I have a couple questions about the actual movie. I don't know if you know the answers to these, but I'll just throw them out there. One is, was the movie almost not made because Lefty didn't want it made, Lefty Rosenthal, and then found out that Robert De Niro was going to play him, and him being a big fan of Robert De Niro, then decided, okay, let's do the movie?
That is essentially true.
Okay.
And that was confirmed by Nick Pileggi the other night. Nick was asked that question, and he said he was having trouble getting Lefty Rosenthal to cooperate with him. In other words, he wanted to interview Lefty Rosenthal for his book, but also for the movie, so that you wanted to get Lefty on board for the movie. So Lefty at first was reluctant, but then they had the ace card. They said, okay, by the way, Lefty, we're planning to have Robert De Niro play you in the movie. And Lefty's eyes lit up. He was a huge fan of De Niro, and certainly probably anybody in the world who would learn that any man who learned that Robert De Niro was going to play you in the movie of your life, you're probably going to say, yeah, that'll work. I'll do that. I mean, whether it's George Clooney or Brad Pitt these days or whatever, I mean, everybody wants that. So that really, he really warmed up at that point, and he really got excited when Robert De Niro went and visited Lefty and talked to him. So you're right. The movie may have been made anyway, but it would have been much more difficult to make without Lefty's cooperation.
When the movie opens up, you see Robert De Niro walk outside some doors. And I understand that was done at Main Street Station, which is downtown near the Mob Museum. Yeah. But the rest of the Tangiers casino that is filmed, that's supposed to be the old Stardust, is actually the Riviera. Is that correct too?
It's the Riviera and a couple of other casinos. Depending on what they wanted to see, yes. But the bulk of the movie was filmed at the Riviera. That is correct. And of course, the Riviera is gone now too.
Yeah. Did you guys get anything from the Riviera that you could put on display?
Unfortunately, no, we did not. And there is Riviera memorabilia out there in the world. We don't have anything in particular from there. And when it was torn down, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, retrieved a lot of material out of the casino, which they had acquired. But we don't have any of that yet. So if anybody listening wants to donate something related to the Riviera to our museum, we'd be happy to consider that. And one of the reasons for that is, aside from the movie Casino, the Riviera in the 1950s and 60s is really the precursor to the Stardust, because the Riviera was the Chicago mob's main hub in Las Vegas, and it was a mobbed up place from 55 to the late 60s.
The other question I have in regards to Casino is, and this is more for our listeners, I'm more familiar with it from being in Las Vegas. How similar was Joe Pesci actually to Tony the Ant Spilotro?
That question also came up recently in our conversations with Oscar Goodman and with Nick Pileggi. And what's interesting is Oscar has two takes on that. The first take was, he tells a story about going to the set of Casino. Remember, Oscar had a couple of small scenes in the movie. And as he's in a room, and he's looking across the room at the back of an individual at the other side of the room, and he has a sort of like a deja vu moment, like, oh my God, that's Tony Spilotro standing over there, my old client. Well, in fact, it wasn't Tony Spilotro, it was Joe Pesci, and Oscar was just amazed. Joe's a relatively diminutive individual, as was Tony Spilotro, about low 5 feet area, and he also held his arm the way Tony Spilotro would often have one arm crooked open out, from his side, and so I think visually, Joe Pesci did a really good job of depicting Tony Spilotro. Now, what Oscar had a problem with, though, was the language that he heard, in the dialogue. In other words, Joe Pesci in the movie, the F word was basically every other word that he uttered in the movie. I think somebody said, somebody counted the expletives in the movie, and it was well in excess of 400. So I think most of those were said by Pesci. According to Oscar, at least in his experience with Tony Spilotro, he said he was a relatively mild-mannered, very courteous, especially around women and children, that Oscar said he never heard him use that word one time in his presence. Now, that's not to say he didn't use it elsewhere, but at least in a good chunk of his life, he was not that person. And so Oscar took some issue with that. But by all accounts, Pesci worked really hard to try to be the Tony Spilotro that you see in video clips and in books, and he seemed to do a good job.
The one thing that stood out to me in the movie is, in the movie, Tony Spilotro is blacklisted from going to the casinos, when in actuality, in real life, I don't believe he was, but Lefty Rosenthal was.
Right. Lefty was in the Black Book, as I recall, and there was big fights about that. Oscar spent his career trying to keep people out of the Black Book. He believed it was an unconstitutional act on the part of the state gaming control regulators. He lost that battle, obviously. But what Oscar objected to so strenuously was, this notion that you don't have the freedom to go, even if you live in Nevada, you can't enter a casino. That means you also can't go to the restaurants there. You can't go to the restrooms there. You can't go to the movie theaters. You can't go to the bowling alleys. Nothing. And he always thought that was a little much. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it was Lefty who had the biggest issue there.
How much has Oscar Goodman meant to the Mob Museum?
My boss at the museum, Jonathan Ullman, he's our president and CEO, who has been with the museum from the start. he describes Oscar as our chief visionary. So, Oscar is the one who came up with the idea for the museum. There's really no dispute about that. That's not to say he was involved in the creation of all the exhibits or that he was involved in any of the day-to-day matters of the museum. But what he did was he sort of created the framework that we've been working from ever since. And he's also continued to serve on the board of directors of the museum in a role like he's one among equals on the board. But people really look up to him and listen to him when it comes to the museum's vision, the museum's bigger picture goals. And so Oscar, and there's that element that Oscar's been important to us. The other is simply his the large number of programs we've put on at the museum in which he's been involved, including, of course, the 25th anniversary of Casino, but also when we did one for the 20th anniversary of Casino, and many others. And he just has a wealth of information, and people love to hear him speak. We are one of the most memorable moments so far in my career here was we held an 80th birthday party for Oscar in the Speakeasy, which is our bar and restaurant space at the museum. And we held an 80th anniversary event, and I was sort of the MC alongside Oscar, and asked him a bunch of questions about his life and so forth. And he was just in this sort of classic mood where, he could be insulting in a Don Rickles sort of way. He could be very funny and also very poignant. And I think it was just people in the room who experienced Oscar at his very best. And it's those are always memorable experiences when he's involved.
Something just came to mind, and Frank Collada recently has passed away, and he was actually in the movie Casino, and you guys just had this anniversary. Was there any talk about how much Frank gave to some of these hits that were shown in the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the original vision for this event was that Frank would be involved, that he would be there. He did pass away, and that did not happen. But, we did talk about him because he was Nick Pileggi had two primary sources for his book and his screenplay. One was Lefty Rosenthal, and the other was Frank Collada. And then Frank Collada ultimately became a technical advisor to Martin Scorsese, the director. Well, the classic story there is, Collada's on the set on most days with Scorsese, making sure that some of the technical aspects of how the mob operates, what things look like, and so forth, were correct or authentic. So one day they're filming a scene where a hitman is killing somebody, and as Nick Pileggi tells it, Frank Collada is shaking his head like he doesn't like what he's seeing, and Pileggi goes up to him and says, "What's going on, Frank? What's wrong?" And Frank's like, "That's not how it happened. That's not how it happened. That's wrong. That's not how it's done." And it became eventually Collada revealed to Nick Pileggi that Frank Collada, was the guy who actually did that hit. He was the guy who did it. And so he knows exactly how it played out because he was there. Well, and Pileggi shared this with Scorsese, and Scorsese, who wasn't happy with how the scene was playing out either, says, "You know what, Frank, I believe you, and not only that, we'll do it the way you want us to do it, but why don't we have you do it?" Because the actor he had before apparently wasn't getting it done. And so Collada then is now going from technical advisor to actor, and he plays out the role and does a good job.
What kind of future displays or plans are coming for the Mob Museum for 2021?
Well, first of all, worth noting, we are going to be putting up another temporary display very soon. We recently acquired some artifacts tied to the origins of the Las Vegas Strip. So what I'm referring to is the Flamingo Hotel. And, the legend has it that it was Bugsy Siegel invented Las Vegas, and he invented the Flamingo Hotel. Well, in fact, the story is more complicated than that, as some people know. It was a man named Billy Wilkerson who actually came up with the idea for the Flamingo and started building the Flamingo. But then he ran out of money and turned to the mob for financial assistance. So one of those mobsters who he turned to was Bugsy Siegel. Siegel came out to Las Vegas to take a look at it as a new investment and took such a liking to it that he decided to take over the project and push Wilkerson out. So that part of the story is depicted in a couple of documents, original documents that we just obtained. And one of those is the check, the down payment check that Billy Wilkerson wrote to a woman named Margaret Folsom, who owned property out on what was then called Highway 91. And he was the guy who bought the acreage that became the Flamingo, and that check proves it. The other document is a legal document in which, from early 1947, where Bugsy Siegel signs a document that absolves Billy Wilkerson of any involvement or responsibility for anything related to the Flamingo. Remember, I said they forced Wilkerson out. He not only forced him out physically, but legally as well. And this document also shows that. And I think what it shows is, Wilkerson was a significant partner in this project until that document was signed. So, I think we're excited. We're really excited to show these original documents, and that's one thing we're doing. Next year, there's a lot of refinements we want to make on the third floor of the museum, which is, for those who have visited already, it's packed with information, packed with great material, but the corridors are quite narrow, and this is because of the historic nature of the building. And we need to streamline some of these areas so we can improve guest traffic flow, especially in this age of social distancing. So that's a big priority next year.
If you can't get to the museum, or somebody that is a big mob historian, a great holiday gift would be a membership. And you can get those online. And if you're hesitant to maybe, get somebody a membership to the museum, you can also go to the Mob Museum's website, which I will put a link to in the show notes. And you can get to their gift shop that has a lot of stuff that you could purchase for yourself or somebody for the holidays. And Geoff, if you would kind of hint a little bit about what the gift shop can offer people online.
So we have our gift shop is interesting because we have a lot. We have an eclectic array of things. Some of which will make good Christmas gifts. Some of which are good for birthdays and everything else. But we certainly have books first and foremost. Books that depict the history of the mob, and we carefully curate those to find the best ones. We have T-shirts. We have fedoras. We have other tchotchkes related to certainly the drinking culture of Prohibition. That's a big popular item in our gift shop, and a lot of memorabilia, sort of that ties in with the mob. Some things are really fun. Some things are a little bit more, grim, if you will. But they're all intended to not to glorify the mob per se, but to help you enjoy and become engaged with this material.
I would highly recommend that you at least check out the website. If you haven't been there and it's on your list when you come to Las Vegas, please move it up your list. I can't tell you how many people that have said, always wanted to get there. And then they finally go. And then what I hear back is, I should have done this a long time ago. And then they become fans. And once you go once, you got to go again. Because to me, it's almost impossible to take it all in. What's all there within 3 floor and the interactive exhibits that are there now. You just can't do it. And as a member, I've been there numerous times and I still don't have it all. I mean, it's a great place to go and the events are great. And if you cannot get to them in person, the Mob Museum offers, especially now during the COVID times, you can actually view these online at the same time they're going on. And there's one coming up, I believe here coming shortly, there's something coming with the Walk at Tampa.
Yes, we're a great friend of the museum, Scott Ditchy, who's a mob historian in Florida, in Tampa. he gives tours. He gives walking tours of old Tampa, where there's a lot of mob activity back in the day. And what we're doing is we're going to do a live walking tour of Tampa. So you'll come to the museum, or you can watch it online, and you will be able to see Scott Ditchy on the streets of Tampa telling you about what happened here, what happened there. Just I'm anticipating a great experience that, you can't get just anywhere. Otherwise, this is the first time you will be able to experience this tour without actually being in Tampa. So we're pretty excited about that. It's December 6th.
That's a great thing. And if this podcast probably will come out after that, so you can probably catch that online afterwards and revisit that. And I would recommend you do so. Geoff, anything else you want to add about the Mob Museum?
Well, I'll tell you, just for those we still get questions. People ask, "Are you open?" And the answer is, we're open. We were closed for a period of time after the COVID first hit, but we've been open since June 1st, and we're very careful with people. We check everybody's temperature before they can enter the museum and so forth. We try to enforce masks and distancing in the museum, but people continue to enjoy our museum even during this very difficult time. And so, if you happen to be in Las Vegas and have a chance, you can do it now. You don't have to wait, a year or whatever it's going to be.
Geoff, thanks for coming on the show and talking about the Mob Museum, the new casino exhibit, and everything that people can expect when they hit the steps and the music starts playing.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
For show notes, go to our website, beforethelightspod.com. Follow us on Instagram @BeforeTheLightsPodcast. If you want to be a member of our Patreon group, the Before the Lights members, and get the extra 5 and a bunch more stuff, including Zoom calls with myself, go to patreon.com/BeforeTheLights. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights Podcast. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.